My name is Sue Riddlestone. I'm the moderator for this session. The session is being recorded and it will be available and uploaded to the Catalyst 2030 website in 1 to 2 days' time. If you could all, in terms of technical issues, if you could all mute your microphones while you're not speaking, and direct your questions to the chat. We will be monitoring the chat. As I say, I'm Sue Riddlestone. I'm co-chair of Working Group 6 of Catalyst 2030, which is about working with governments and the UN and to scale our solutions. Many of you here are also members of Catalyst 2030, which my co-moderator, Frederick, is going to introduce in a moment. I'll just introduce the team. Susanna is going to manage the sort of technical issues and the PowerPoints. Emily is going to manage the breakout rooms. Carol, Frederick and myself will be helping in the breakout rooms to support you. We're going to have 3 breakout rooms for the 3 topics that we're going to discuss: rural mobility, forests and oceans, which will happen after the panel session, which will last about half an hour. So if you could start, if you know that you're a forest person and you want to go into forests, if you could say in the chat which breakout room you would like to go to, then Emily can start allocating you to the right breakout room. So I'll hand over to Frederick Bailey to give an introduction to Catalyst 2030. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Hello, everyone. Since we want this session to be as interactive as possible, and as you have noticed, there aren't that many of us, and that's a parti pris, as we say in French, because again, we don't want too many people. We want everyone to really be part of this session. So it is a roundtable rather than a conference. But please use the chat box. I suggest we all say something to greet everyone and to make it as lively as possible. So my name is Frederick Bailey. I work at Group SOS. I'm an executive board member within this large social enterprise, which is based in Paris, even though I am here in Casablanca, working and living here. Group SOS is a large, like I said, social enterprise, and we are active in different fields of activity, and we have a few of our executives here today with us. Thank you for being here. Catalyst, which is what gathers us here today, is a global collaborative multi-stakeholder movement. It was established just about a year ago by leading social entrepreneurs from the main networks and foundations such as Ashoka, Going Green, Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship and SCOL, and others, other social entrepreneurs, other social innovators and stakeholders. And our purpose is really to accelerate progress towards the SDGs. As you can see from on this slide, at the current rate, and it's probably going from bad to worse every day with COVID, at the current rate, we won't be addressing the 17 SDGs, or we won't be achieving them, the targets, until 2094. So there is an emergency, obviously, as the effects of this delay will be absolutely devastating. So we have obviously limited and crucial time horizon to act quickly, decisively and collectively. And that's what Catalyst is about, is really to work together, to work across different fields and different sectors of expertise, and to address together those SDGs. We believe that by involving, that involves more systems change practitioners from the front lines, but also everyone who's really addressing the SDGs. This group is supported by other organizations, including McKinsey, who's been very helpful in working with us. The current campaign that we're working on, and today's session is the second round actually on climate. And the current campaign is really, as you can see from the slide, a unified campaign. We are addressing again all the SDGs. We're working all together through those virtual engagements, you know, to share how we as social innovators and entrepreneurs are responding to COVID-19. Obviously, this has impacted our agenda, and it's probably giving us even more of a sense of urgency. We are forming collaborative partnerships, and we are co-creating, and this is what those sessions and today's session is about. It's really co-creating policy recommendations, showing again the solutions that we as social entrepreneurs and innovators are able to put in place and to scale. So towards the end of those sessions, we will be producing a document based on all the different sessions that we've been having on the different topics and issues related to the SDGs. And we will be introducing this paper to the UN Deputy Secretary General, as well as other member states who will be gathering next month for the high-level political forum on the SDGs. So again, thank you for being with us. This is all about co-creating, about showing our solutions, also about addressing policy issues and recommendations. And I'm passing over back to you, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frederick. That was a good introduction to Catalyst 2030. And if you are a social entrepreneur who's not already a member, or a social innovator, even in policy or in academia, do join in, do apply. You can have a look on the website and find out more. So we now have a panel with some amazing speakers. We're taking these three topics, as I said earlier: rural mobility, oceans and forests. And our first speakers are speaking about rural mobility. We're going to hear from Bernhard Zimmler from GIZ, the German Agency for International Cooperation. And until the end of 2019, Bernhard headed up the energy and transport section of GIZ and was in charge of interregional projects in the field of energy and transport. He has now joined the Euroclimate Plus programme to manage the German contribution to the EU flagship programme now in Latin America. And he is working to support 18 Latin American countries in their NDC, so their climate plan, implementation and strategies for the green recovery. So it's a very influential job, Bernhard. We're very grateful to have you here today. And then after Bernhard, we will hear from Susan Bornstein, who is the Global Director, Growing Impact of World Bicycle Relief, which is working on global institutional partnerships and influencing efforts. So Susan's going to run through that social entrepreneur solution, which is lovely, well, I must say. So over to you, Bernhard and Susan. Thank you. Bernhard, do we have you here?
You are muted, Bernhard.
Ah, can you unmute yourself, Bernhard?
I think you have muted me. Okay, once again, thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. I will talk about the challenges, problems, but also necessary measures, possible measures in the field of rural transport mobility. And personally, I've worked several years in the field of energy access, very similar also in rural areas in Bolivia. And with my colleagues worldwide, we have developed various approaches and experiences where private sector initiatives can be integrated in a meaningful way. Despite, and this is very important, despite the limited financial resources of the most poor people in these regions. So there are business opportunities also on the bottom line of the pyramid. Within GIZ, we have therefore started to focus more on the issue of rural transport, because the lack of access to transport is a major obstacle to development. In our view, many of the goals of SDGs can be achieved more quickly. I will go after this to this slide. We can achieve more quickly with improved access to transport, sustainable mobility, and you showed, Frederick, this picture of this SDGs. Infrastructure often has to do with the health, as the SDG 3, education, SDG 4, agriculture and food, SDG 2, and of course, economic development. Now I would like to start with the analysis, and important to know is that more than 1 billion people in rural areas lack access to reliable roads and affordable transportation with all the consequences. And also what we see in most countries that many governments lack the funds, or they don't have even ideas how to maintain public transportation systems and road networks, especially in isolated rural areas. Rural mobility is often also in the international community overlooked policy strategies, planning, investments, and also there is in rural areas the people lack financial resources to buy cars, motorcycle, or even a solid bicycle. And of course, the lack of this mobility impacts access to livelihood, healthcare, education, and also has much to do with now with the green recovery initiatives. Okay, next please. How to improve, this is something I will do very shortly, because if we talk about transport and mobility, first of all, we have to talk about infrastructure. And this is something we have to think about, how to plan rural networks, paths and roads. We don't need always these big highways, big roads. What kind of infrastructure do we need? And we have to harmonize climate friendliness with development issues. Of course, we have to build the infrastructure, we have to finance it, possibly local sources, but also what is needed, especially in rural areas, is a co-financing with governments, with international institutions, also with private sector, it's possible. And of course, for all of this, what is needed are training, are good capacities. Also, the next slide, please. The maintenance is really of utmost importance, because we see that we can invest in new infrastructure, but with a good system of maintenance, who pays for it, who organizes. Also, training is needed. I think these are big packages you have to think if you talk about rural mobility. The next, please. I go through very quickly. This is maintenance. Now we are talking about the kind of vehicles, because this is also important if you as entrepreneur are looking, okay, to watch what kind of vehicle should we select, for example. And we have this classification of passengers, freight transport, also non-motorized transport. And there are many factors, and I won't go into detail, but you have it then after this, and we can discuss it also in the discussion, the factors for selection and uses of appropriate vehicles. And there are a lot of different factors also. We have to consider gender, age equality, climate compatibility, employment, creation of job, etc. And I think this is important to consider it in the planning stages. And then I come to the next one. This is finance and the partners. So also, and this is clear for you, that a clear definition of what has to be financed is needed. And then we have different financing sources additional to the national governments or the local governments. We have this, of course, the private sector, and then the international finance institutions. And there are possibilities for the private sector of financing roads, electricity, energy provision. There are possibilities also of social businesses, public-private partnership. Also very often we have used it in the past, not in the mobility sector. Grants for concept equity investments. So these are some possibilities, some examples. And then I come to the last, because I have now 1.5 minutes left. Some ideas for further scale up in collaboration with social entrepreneurs. I think what is very important is that we have to all together to increase international political support, especially perhaps in this SDGs, because it's really, really low. Like in general, also the transport sector is coming now into attention, but not the rural transport. Then what is needed is increasing attention from international cooperation and private sector. So this is attention. And there are many specific measures we also can talk in the discussion about this. What I propose is a global program mobilizing development. We had once energizing development in the energy sector. We spent nearly 500 million euros for this, and it was really quite successful. What is also needed is much more information, awareness raising, advocacy, also enhancing applied research, exchange best practices, analyzing risk opportunities. And what is needed, I think, and this is something for the entrepreneurs, is what I mentioned before, the cooperation between public and private sector. And this is something we also could together implement very specific projects, and we have done it also, and we are doing it. And there are very, very good examples also. Development of new business models. This is part of this demonstration projects, the digitalization of rural transport, a very important issue. And also, last but not least, to integrate rural development into the green recovery strategies and the programs, because they are so much fun. Okay, I think 8 minutes. Please, Susan. I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bernhard. That was just a fabulous kind of foreshadowing. So I appreciate how you highlighted rural mobility, often overlooked in development planning. And very importantly, how sustainable mobility solutions are key to achieving the SDGs. Frederick talked about how right now we're not seeing that likely to happen until 2094. So as we think about building back better with the green recovery, bicycles are the most climate-friendly transport option in rural areas, and they are a sustainable option for many millions of people in developing countries who lack that affordable and reliable transportation. And many of those people can't afford cars or motorcycles as well. It's interesting to note that Project Drawdown prioritized girls' education as one of the top scalable solutions to address climate change. And one of those key sub-strategies is reducing the time and distance to get to school. So here's just one example about how bicycles are a proven solution where distance is a barrier, in this case to rural students, and particularly girls. Most of the bicycles in developing country markets weren't designed for rural conditions and weren't designed for the preferences of the specific end users. In those rural areas, they're not durable, they're expensive to maintain, they don't provide long-term community solutions for the diverse transportation needs that they have. Rooted in the global cycling industry, 15 years ago, World Bicycle Relief, or WBR, created a new category of bicycle in the market to meet needs in the base of the economic pyramid. And this bicycle is based on the inputs from those men, women, boys, and girls on what their specific preferences and needs were in this product as a productive asset to help them thrive across all the dimensions of their lives. Next slide, please. So the Buffalo bicycle that you can see here was specifically designed as a transportation solution for rugged terrain. It was designed to be long-lasting, easy to maintain, and to carry heavy loads, 100 kg on the back. WBR's for-profit enterprise Buffalo Bicycles Limited locally assembles these bicycles in Kenya, Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and Colombia, and sells the Buffalo to institutions and individuals. WBR itself distributes the Buffalo to those people in need who can't afford to buy them, including rural students and volunteer healthcare workers. So in that time, since the bike was created, almost 520,000 have been distributed across over 20 countries in Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Buffalo Bicycle supports its users with a sustainable supply of spare parts and trains community mechanics via a network of retail shops. So this sustainable mobility ecosystem is really critical, and it supports the long-term social impacts in rural communities that are created when communities are mobilized. WBR's approach is based on partnering with local communities, NGOs involved in health, education, food security, etc., private sector, and governments to embed bicycle mobility solutions into locally driven strategies. Bicycles amplify development results. Data shows dairy farmers deliver 25% more to markets and earn 23% more income. Student attendance rises 28%, and healthcare workers can double the number of patients they can reach in a day. So these are very concrete impacts in support of the SDGs. Next slide, please. And so in terms of scaling, our off-the-shelf solution, there's significant potential to scale now to support accelerated achievement of the SDGs. There are new opportunities for cross-sector partnerships, integrating rural mobility needs into programs with communities and NGOs and governments and businesses. And we have two specific key policy recommendations to amplify the voices of rural communities that are seeking sustainable mobility. The first, very specifically, is a resolution and then an amendment to the SDGs to specifically embed rural mobility across them at a systems level and promote that systems level change. And that will then facilitate integration of mobility into governments, funder priorities, policies, programs, and budgets. And it will really help promote this kind of cross-sector collaboration that needs to happen. It would also help address the stigma in many places that the bicycle is a poor person's transportation. And then the second key policy ask is for a UN-facilitated global compact to eliminate import duties on bicycles, especially for bicycles targeting users at the base of the economic pyramid in developing countries. So just as a very brief example, in Zambia, our bicycle sells for about $135. There's 25% duty and 16% VAT. So that's $50 additional going directly to government on top of the price of the bike. So thank you very much, and look forward to your questions and feedback and more discussions in the breakout groups.
Thanks so much, Susan. And that was really fascinating and inspiring. And Bernard, the background information there was really useful for the discussion in the breakout session as well, I think. Just to say, if anyone has any questions, if you could put them in the chat, then we'll try to organise them a bit, and we should have sort of 5 to 10 minutes for some questions of the speakers at the end, as well as chatting in the breakout room. We're running a little bit behind already, but let's plough on. So now we're going to dive into the oceans, and we're going to hear from Julia Oliveira from Blue Ventures, who works to measure social impact within the programme, which you'll hear about. And then Alex Grosskopf, from the co-founder of Ocean Hub Africa, who's going to tell us about how he wants to support solutions like Julia's. So over to you, Amandine. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean Amandine. I mean Julia. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Sue. Yeah, glad to be here. Hi, everyone. So I'd like to start by just telling you a little bit about that picture that you're seeing. So these are two fishermen out at work in a normal day in southwest Madagascar. They live in one of the poorest countries on earth. And in Madagascar, in coastal areas, most of the households depend directly or indirectly on fishing. And these are the people whom we call small-scale fishers because of the size of the boats, which, as you can see, is quite small. So Southwest Madagascar is also the first home of Blue Ventures, which I'm representing today. Blue Ventures is a marine conservation organization dedicated to preserving tropical marine life by working with the people to whom it's most vital, and those are the coastal communities. We make conservation work for people, demonstrating powerful win-wins for marine solutions, biodiversity, and coastal livelihoods. And we support coastal communities to tackle the complex, interconnected challenges they have to face, which include climate change or COVID right now, to which there are no one-size-fits-all technical solutions. So you can move on the slides as I talk. I've included some pictures of where we work. So why do we think that's important, and why do we spend so much time and effort and energy on this topic? It's over 100 million people in the global south who rely on subsistence and artisanal fishing for their livelihoods and food. The waters they fish every day harbor the greater part of marine biodiversity on the planet, which means that fishing and conservation are inextricably linked. However, throughout the coastal tropics, climate change and overfishing are decimating that marine life, and coral reefs and mangrove forests are being lost. And with the loss of these, the food and the livelihoods of some of the world's most vulnerable and marginalized people is also disappearing. So what we see is that our oceans and the tropical small-scale fishing communities that we support are facing an environmental and humanitarian emergency, which has only been aggravated recently with COVID. But the small-scale fishing communities, we believe, also hold some of the solution. Because of the complexity and the impacts of climate change, local people who are the ones who have the knowledge of their environment, because it's the environment they live in and they depend on, are the best place to choose how to adapt and manage natural resources. And that's especially true for coastal fishing communities whose lives are so linked to their natural environment. Because when local people define and undertake climate actions, these actions respond to their actual context, they're cost effective and they last. So what do we at Blue Ventures do? We do basically three things. First, to achieve local change, we provide individual fishing communities with a simple yet effective model powered by data on fisheries, mangrove, or other data needs, sometimes supported by technological innovation. We can talk about it more in the breakout room, to rebuild fisheries and manage the natural resources locally. Second, to achieve change that goes far beyond what we can do ourselves, we support local partners and we build networks of networks. So bringing together fishers associations with local civil societies organizations, for instance. And to defend small-scale fisheries and promote meaningful action on climate change, we champion the rights of small-scale fishers. Because for them, maybe more than for any one of us, climate change is an everyday reality. And so within that, it's been almost 2 decades now that we support fishing communities by investing in solutions along 4 axes that are fundamental to building socio-ecological resilience. The first axe is around nature-based mitigation of carbon emissions. Second axe, healthy fisheries. Third, livelihoods. And finally, enabling access to basic health and reproductive care. So if I move on to our policy recommendations, we believe that it is essential to support reform of fisheries and marine conservation policy to protect coastal fishers and accelerate locally led marine conservation, securing access right to those who depend on fishing for survival. They should be the ones having the means and the rights to manage their resources and their fishing waters and having priority over their use. Because their fishing, the fishing of those fishes you saw on the pictures, is generally more selective and sustainable than the one practiced by bigger industrial boats, which is often destructive. These coastal communities have the most to gain from conservation, because for many of them, fishing is what keeps them from hunger, poverty, or forced migration. And yet what we see in the countries we work is that in most cases, industrial fisheries have priority over those resources. And the question we constantly ask ourselves is, how is that possible? And how is that still allowed? So just wrapping up now, our core policy recommendations are decolonize conservation, make sure coastal communities get access rights to the resources they depend on, support bottom-up policy reform by supporting the creation of locally managed marine areas and trusting the power of civil society, and finally, making livelihoods along the small-scale fisheries value chain sustainable not only for the planet, but also for the people who rely on them. That's it, Blue Ventures in a nutshell. I'll pass on to Alexis now.
Thanks, Julia. Hi guys, from Cape Town. My name is Alexei. I'm the co-founder of Ocean Hub Africa. And obviously, speaking after Julia, this is going to resonate even bigger. I want to talk about the problems here and how do we aspire to address them at Ocean Hub Africa. Obviously, we all know that oceans are, being the largest ecosystem on our planet. They clearly are the life support system of again planet Earth. It's called Earth. Actually, it's a mistake. It should be called water because there's more water than anything. It provides, it generates everything climate related. It gives us, it fills our lungs, our stomach, our hearts, sometimes our wallets as well. So they are essential to us humans. And what we tend to overlook is that they also depend on us because of our activity. And if you look at the different SDGs, over half of them have linkages to the ocean. And what we are trying to do at Ocean Hub Africa is to leverage technologies, new ocean solutions to be able to address the main challenges that oceans are being threatened with today, namely pollution, overexploitation, and the effects of global warming on our oceans. And to this, and Catalyst 2030 does this very well, you can address this through policy change, talking to policymakers. So kind of a B2G level. You can try to empower people and educate them so they can change their behavior, which is more of a B2C model. And Ocean Hub Africa is placing itself on a B2B level, trying to help businesses using innovation to be able to change the way they operate and essentially reducing thereby their impact on our oceans and trying to restore them. Next slide, please. The accelerator that we run at Ocean Hub Africa, because this is what we are, essentially we're a startup accelerator, chooses its startup with this mission in mind. So we're looking at the technology, how innovative technology is. We're looking at the business model, is it scalable? What's the market potential? And obviously we're looking at the impact. Are we addressing in an impact for profit way, one or a combination of the three main challenges that I listed just above: the pollution, the overexploitation, and the effect of global warming on our oceans. So for this, we've been able to launch our first cohort of accelerators earlier this year. And they operate across the sector. The oceans industry is vast. You have your tourism and water sports, you have your boat building and the shipping, the fisheries and aquaculture, but also the poaching and piracy. You have your marine renewable energies. And this is just to name a few of the ocean industry, because the impact goes beyond the mere ocean industry. You have your indirect impact from the land-based agriculture, the retail space, and obviously fashion. We all know that the clothes now are putting tons of microplastics into the ocean every year. So the different startups that we have operate across the different impact levels. And we do this, we deliver these services for growth and allowing those impactful startups to grow their business and thereby their impact through a network of partners and mentors that we built within Africa. And this gave us a position as an ESO, entrepreneurial support organization, working on SDGs to achieve the different objectives of the different sustainable development goals set out by the United Nations, to enter the advisory network of the high-level panel for sustainable oceans economy. oceanpanel.org if you want to Google it. This is a subcommission of the United Nations, and we've been tasked with other ESOs such as Catapult Ocean, and also VC funds, venture capitalist funds such as Blue Partners or Conservation International Ventures, with the endorsement of this ocean panel of the UN, to create a coalition to be able, on a global scale, to streamline the process of development and adoption of those ocean solutions. Next slide, please. And that takes me to my ask to the UN now, and the policymakers out there. The ocean tech space is a frontier market in that sense that there've been very little investment made, some 400 each in the last couples of years, and no exit recorded. So it's a risk for private wealth individuals to go and try and invest in that space. It's been largely supported by philanthropy and a bit of the IGOs, but unfortunately the DFIs, such as GIZ actually here in the room, but also the supranationals, the IMF, the World Bank, and such, should try to provide funding with lesser restriction to be able to prove the concept, you know, from the very early development stage to the adoption, and unlock further private money further down the line. So my ask to the UN and the policymakers is, please, guys, go back to your DFIs, you know, national development finance institutions, and unlock a bit more funding. Take on the risk that the private investors are not willing to take today because we're running out of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia and Alex. Very inspiring, great initiatives there. I think we'll move on, as we're running 5 or 10 minutes behind now, to Amandine Herzog, who is General Manager of Planète Urgence, which is an international organisation to empower humans for a more inclusive and sustainable planet. So they're partnering across 15 countries to design and implement sustainable forest ecosystem preservation programs. So Amandine has brought her business experience to this work and is working worldwide, and also has a great background in working with women and social enterprises. Over to you, Amandine.
Thank you, Sue. Really great to be with you. Perhaps on forest, let's start with the beginning, which is the situation. I don't know if you heard, last week we had the review of the Global Forest Watch, which underlined that last year was a black year for forest again, even despite speeches, despite commitment, despite mobilization of citizens and NGOs. It has been a real black year. If we take back some data, the tropic lost 12 million hectares of tree covers, and 1/3 of that loss, so 3.8 million, is related to primary forests, so initial forests. Every time we're losing some forests, we're not only losing trees, but we're also losing the biodiversity, as 80% of the worldwide biodiversity is related to forests, is living in forests. We're also having an impact on the climate change, as it's the second carbon sink in the world after oceans. And we also have an impact on the people, on the humans, as we know that 20% of the communities living in developing countries have a big link with forest capacities, and they can survive thanks to forests. So that's the situation, and it's not a nice one, but I really think that we can make it change by creating coalitions. So at all level, and I'm working for Planète Urgence, which is an NGO working on reforestation and ecosystem restoration. We are doing 360 programs, so that's the second slide. And you will find some parallel with oceans, because I choose mangrove ecosystem restoration, where we can see that indeed we can implement programs at the community level, really concrete and local level, where you can work on different aspects of the issues. So the first one is to restore ecosystem, mangrove ecosystem, doing reforestation, and reforestation also within the aqua ponds of the local farmers. Then you can also have education impact through environmental education activities for kids, but also for fishermen, and also education on sustainable aqua ponds management. We're doing management of stakeholders at a local level, to be able to be supported by authorities and to get capacity in terms of land management. And I could have had, Julia, probably some connection to marine conservation, and we are not at all working on this part, but it will be really great to discuss. One really important thing for us is to be able to work with Amir, who is on the photo, and also with all the community leaders to really create a sustainable governance, because they need to be the one to lead the sustainable activity behind. And also we are there to improve the capacity of living of the community. So we want to increase the revenues via yeah. So you can see that there is 360 activities. So reforestation is one thing, but if we are not able to activate also education, economic development, authorities management, we won't succeed. This program is also is an example, but you can have many programs around the world. What is needed now is to go a step further. And for that, so that's my next slide. For that, I think that we need to move from local cases and beautiful local cases to an organized global movement. We need to gather energies around forests. So probably like an ocean hub, we need a forest hub. And we need to go a step further in terms of raising a common voice, capitalizing on knowledge and capacity to act more quickly in a more organized way, and really to focus on adaptation capabilities. Because today we are all doing the job, but probably not focusing on what really makes a difference in terms of climate, in terms of adaptation capabilities for the communities. And I also think that we need to accelerate on replication and scale up through massive funding. So that's the same story as oceans. Funding will be a key. So last thing I wanted to share with you is the policymakers. What do we expect? We expect a lot, actually, because I think many NGOs, many citizens, many communities are doing the job at a local level. But to go a step further, we will need the support from policymakers, and not only greenwashing support, but a real one in terms of commitments. For two different things. The first one is to stop deforestation. 80% of the deforestation is related to intensive agriculture. So the idea is to have restrictive regulation in terms of imported food, for instance, that you can find in your country. It's also to have some labeling on forest footprint. Today, when you go to the supermarket, you have a label in terms of quality of products, in terms of agricultural practices, but you don't have any label in terms of forest impact. And it could be the case. There is also a point around the international local agreements, because every time you're buying something, it has an impact on the planet, and this needs to be, and I think that's the case also for oceans, it needs to be integrated as an impact in the agreement negotiation. So that's the first point, is really to stop deforestation. And then the second one is to support sustainable forest plans. So that's great to have local programs. It would be great to have more funding, but it would be even more important to have a dedicated governance, capacities, laws and funding at a government level, to be really able to measure and to have criteria in terms of decision-making process in each countries. So to summarize very quickly, Sue, I know we are out of time. First, biodiversity preservation needs urgent actions. There are many community-based solutions, but we need to scale it up, and we need to gather forces to do that.
That's wonderful, Amandine. I was pleased to see we have Shahzad Qureshi from Urban Forest in Pakistan has been able to join us today. Hopefully we'll join the breakout room. And we have had a question from Bernard about, I don't know, Amandine, if you know, or Shahzad, if you know, what could exactly be done in Brazil under the current government? Obviously, huge amount of deforestation.
I have to explain it a little bit, because we are now in the discussion about the Amazonas region. Many countries, we have the Leticia Pact, we have OTCA, we have other institutions, and now with all these right-wing governments, not only in Brazil, which is perhaps the worst, really where to find the entrance for this discussion, because it's absolutely clear what you said, Amandine, but now this is a political issue, and I'm really a little bit lost in this, because I made a proposal, okay, to start a process with all other countries in the Amazon region, but concretely it's very difficult.
Indeed, Brazil was last year the first country in terms of loss of forest coverage. And the thing with Brazil is, us as NGOs, it's difficult to act. So Jean-Marc Jancovici, who is an expert in carbon, he's a great guy. You can look at his profile. He says yesterday, the only thing we can do with Brazil is to motivate them with finance. If they see an interest to conserve their forest, they will do it. So if the national organization can put some finance behind the forest, I don't like this idea conceptually, but for Brazil, he said it will be the only way.
Germany has spent some 100 millions for the tropical forest in Brazil, and Brazil has thrown us out of the country. Yeah, only to give you an idea, it's really not so easy. So okay.
And clearly, as an NGO, we're not working today in Brazil. We are very active in Indonesia, in Madagascar, in Cameroon, so Africa, Indonesia. We are looking for opportunities for Peru and Ecuador, so it's another way to protect Amazonia. But for Brazil, too complex. It's too complex for us.
Okay, I think that's definitely one to pick up in the forest breakout room. Hopefully I think we should move to the breakout rooms now. Thank you so much for those wonderful provocations and ideas about the solutions. I was just in an earlier Catalyst workshop about working with governments, and let's remember that governments have their own plans and priorities, and thinking about Brazil, or maybe even the German government, we as social entrepreneurs need to offer governments as experts solutions, but we don't talk about it like that. We just say, we are experts in forest, can we help you with that? So I think that was the good feedback that we got from many speakers in the earlier session about working with governments. So in terms of the tasks for the breakout rooms, hopefully you've all chosen. If not, please do let Emily know in the chat now. We have rural mobility, oceans and forests for about 25 minutes. And our task is to discuss how can we scale up these solutions? How can we create more partnerships because we've got to achieve the SDGs faster than, as we heard Frederick say, 2094 is too late. And as we heard Amandine say, and all the speakers actually, nature is disappearing around us and people are in poverty and need great livelihoods. So how can we scale this up fast? And secondly, what are the policy changes that we want to ask for to support rapid scaling of these approaches? And this will be recorded in the session by one of the people in the team, and we will make sure that it's included in this report that is going to be presented by the French government at the UN High-Level Political Forum. So Emily will be moderating the breakout rooms, and if you have any questions, you can always put it in the chat if you want to communicate with any of us. Okay, so off we go. Press the button and hopefully magically we'll all go.
Great. Ah, well done. You're muted. Teal.
Yes, sorry.
I should have come out earlier, really, shouldn't I, as the moderator? Sorry about that. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had some great discussions. We certainly did in the forest group. So I think if we take it in the order, it'd be great to get some feedback from the three rooms. So if we take it in the order of the presentations, who is the rapporteur for the rural mobility session? If you could just give us sort of your top level 3 points on those two questions about scaling and partnerships and policy.
This is Carol. Susan, do you want to do it, or would you like me to? We didn't come to a final. We get, it's such a short period of time. Susan, would you like me to take that?
Go ahead. I can just jump in if there's anything quick.
Yeah, jump in. I mean, we didn't really come to the final 3 things, but we talked about making sure that government is working cross-sector. They don't often do that. So transport, education, health, because a lot of, to frame this in terms of what rural people need in able to access health and education. As a way to frame the policy that we need, because the needs are so different, even micro-regionally. So even in one country, rural needs isn't fine-tuned enough that we need to look regionally. So I think that's 2. So working cross-sector within governments, looking micro-regionally, maybe framing it in terms of impact, mobility's importance and impact on getting access to basic needs like health and education. What else am I missing, Susan and team?
I think the point by Mathieu about mobility is right. That's very much aligned with the WVR proposal for the resolution and amendment to the SDGs and embedding mobility. And then we had a great discussion around the ecology of modes and the integration of all the different modes to support rural, urban in a very holistic way in support of what's needed at a local level. And then we learned a little bit more about Match's specific solution and potential to support those kinds of initiatives for scaling partnerships.
Fantastic, thank you, Rural Mobility Group. So if you guys could, in fact, this goes for all the groups, if the person who was taking notes could make sure it's captured as well as possible, and we can always share with the panelists to make sure we've really can draw that out, and then this will then go forward to this report to be included in these recommendations to governments. So moving on then to oceans, who's the rapporteur for oceans?
Okay, I'm going to try and be the rapporteur, and I will ask obviously my friends and colleagues to comment and add to what I said, because we didn't really have time to properly wrap up. But my understanding is that first of all, there is an overarching issue around obviously education. We need to educate people, that's a fact. But then if we are maybe to focus on 3 points or topics, we did ask Alexi, with the help of Ted, to actually elaborate more on the issue of finance, which we all agree is a big issue. So there is need for more financial, I wouldn't call it support, but for more investment and for basically for finance to help actually finance those projects. And Alexi, you will have to elaborate on that. If I'm going to try and make it short, but please elaborate if you want to. There is a big issue that would probably have to come before, before even finance, is an issue around the rights of fishers. We again all agreed that it is important that the coastal communities that Julia mentioned, but we were also lucky to have Tom with us, who was an ex-member of parliament and minister in the UK, and who recognized that the UK should probably take the lead now that it's leaving the EU. It still has to retain some sort of like topics or issues to champion, and obviously the rights of small fishing communities, which is an issue in the UK and is an issue in many developing countries. That's obviously something that needs to be addressed and worked on. And then we also mentioned something around mapping projects and solutions also, and that's obviously echoes what Catalyst is about, and the latest discussions that we've had within the Catalyst 2030 movement is how do we actually together map our expertise and solutions, how do we also map the needs in the communities and the countries so that together we can come up with integrated solutions. So I think something around, again, mapping projects and solution is obviously one of the other topics. I'm trying to keep it short. We did mention, then we went into more specifics, you know, around blue bonds, for instance, coming back to the issue of financing the oceans, conservation and industry, and how we also need to come up with tools which are more accessible to communities, because we also came to realize that those, the example of blue bonds, this is a great product, but it doesn't work everywhere. It's difficult to implement. So there is something that's needed in terms of making those tools more accessible. That's it for me. Guys, please feel free to comment or
no,
correct.
I think it boils down to how can we decentralize resource management when it comes to the ocean. So you talked about the fishing community, but the other type of communities on the coastal lines, and how do we do the M&E for the measurement and evaluation for this using the right technology, and how do we prove that this happens? We need the sort of the government money to take the first blow, take the first risk, so we can have our couple of success stories that entice other private wealth to invest into that space.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, moving on to forests. I think Shazad is going to report back from the forests breakout session. Shazad.
Hi. So I think major discussion remained on what kind of a policy interventions should be improved upon, and I think overall to protect the current forests that are already in place and to promote more reforesting in every country. And one of the policies I think should be more strictly implemented as per the group is whatever production that they trade in the world through World Trade Organization and the laws that exist through which we trade all of that, sustainability should be the focal point on that. Making sure that they are not letting go of their green assets, their forested spaces to produce that crop or you know, anything in the ocean or fisheries. It's not, you know, you're not reducing that special, sorry, hi, okay, so we are, so, you know, we should protect whatever is there, and the production should be limited to whatever is available spaces or production capacity that have to market sustainable. I think one of the key point was that we should limit that trade for that particular country or that space. That's one. And then secondly, to promote it further, I mean, the financial means or the resources need to channel more flow into these countries or these spaces to create reforest that spaces that they have left alone or are not allowed to produce, let's say, foods or crops or any other things in there. So these were the two, I think, key points that we were discussing. And scaling up actually all of these green environments. I mean, for example, in our country, in Pakistan, lately the government has started hiring a lot of people to plant trees because all the jobs that are going away because of the corona and the other. So there is a whole new potential in these green fields where we can retool, repurpose people, and actually put these resources back into work, and get that economy or the green economy going. So I think scaling would require finances going into training of these people, and then hopefully scaling the solutions which already exist in reforesting. And that should help us get back to the numbers that we need to. Yeah, any other addition from the members, please, if they want to add to. I think that's what I kind of got down.
I've just put in a plug for what you do, Shazad, which is urban forests. And we talked about in Karachi there's only 0.6% forest. In London we've got something like 49%, and that forests shouldn't just be seen as out there, but perhaps we could have policies to plant up our cities, because there has so many benefits as well for cooling and holding water to stop flooding, and also droughts, and biodiversity and beauty and enjoyment as well. So I think that one's going in from my point of view.
Yeah, I think forest and in general across the country, as well as places where actually human beings are living, should be as green as a forest should be, because it just gives so many benefits instantly for the population that lives in and around it. So that should be part of the policy as well.
Oh, look, here's Subendu, who works with Shazad on forests. Hello. We're just wrapping up actually, but welcome, Subendu. We were just talking about your work. It's going in. So thank you, everyone. We've just had the most amazing expert contributions, not just from the panel, but from you as attendees. And it was very deliberately, as Frederick said at the beginning, it was very deliberately we reached out to you if you were particularly an expert in these areas or had a particular interest in this area. So we really are grateful to you for that. What will happen is in 1 to 2 days, I think you may receive an email, is that right, Susanna, with the recording of the session. We will be hastily compiling what you've said into a report, which will then go forward to Matthew Bishop, the journalist, who is compiling from all the roundtables a report which will be presented by at a roundtable of the French government by Giroux Bilimoria from Catalyst 2030. And we will be doing some work to lobby around the margins of that as well. We're not just going to have one event at the High Level Political Forum for the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to try to get a multiplier effect on that. You will see the report. I'm not promising to let you see it and comment on it, but if there's any particular thing that you wanted to write down more precisely, please do send it in. Just wondering how to do that, Susanna. But yeah, hopefully you will have one of our contacts and you can get in touch if there's something very specific that you wanted to make sure was captured correctly. So we will let you know when we will show you the report. We will share with you what happened if you have shared your email details with us. So, sorry, someone had a question. No? Does anyone have anything else to ask or add as we've hit the half an hour? So we're finishing now. If not, thank you all very much indeed. And
yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Yes, thank you.
Bye. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.